Matches, an unofficial Changeling the Lost story by Tom Moore. Step by frightening step she made her way. Trees and moss-covered walls lurked left and right of her, creeping ever closer. From the shadows, yellow-eyed faces spied on her. Birds, made from weeds, crooked their neck to have a good view of her. The stars got themselves caught in the tree branches and did little to lighten the path. She had feared this journey for so long, was afraid of the bitter coldness. Like knives made of ice, a steady breeze cut into her flesh. It soaked through her torn jeans and swelled up through her shoes as if she were barefoot. She was so tired, tired from running, tired of hiding, tired of being lonely. For as long as she could remember, she had been out there in that maze of walls and claws. Where was she going? It's so hard to remember, so hard to hope to find a warm place as the wind takes the warmth from everything. She took a look at her frozen fingers. They were clinging to a small box of matches. She sighed and opened the box just a little. Her fingers stung with a sharp pain for every tiny movement. There weren't too many left. 3? Probably not enough. But there was no other way. Gritting her teeth to endure the excruciating agony, she pulled one of the matches out of the box and rubbed it against the rough wall. Brilliant, bright, full of passion, a small flame sprang into life. The warmth rushed through her hand, washed away the pain, freed her lungs, and brought a bright shine to her eyes. Suddenly, Christabel was well aware of her surroundings. She was standing on the walkway next to a busy road. The winter night was cold and the street lights gave only a meager shine as they bowed beneath some lonely trees. Cars rushed by, and people in thick clothes ignored the young woman dressed in ripped jeans, perforated boots, and a worn-out jacket. Very carefully she shielded the burning match from the wind and ventured on. There was a familiarity in the shop windows to her left. She must have grown up in this place. A fitting memory awoke from its slumber in her subconsciousness. Out of the window was the wizened face of Mrs. Miller looking out onto the street. The match flame started to flicker, and Mrs. Miller's eyes locked with Christabel's. There was no welcome, no warmth, only disgust for the lost girl. With a brief flare of pain in her fingertips, the match died, and with it the street, the shop, and Mrs. Miller were gone instead. The maze was back, and winter settled upon the walls and plants. She had to go on. She wasn't safe here. This time she wasn't only spied upon, this time she could hear the paws stepping on the crisp ice membrane on the snow behind her. As if to mock her, The wind turned and carried the smell of a predator from behind her to her nostrils. One hand on the frozen stone surface, she struggled forwards. The hunter drew in long and slow breaths, biding its time. It must know that she was wounded, that she was exhausted. The girl would become an easy prey. She didn't dare to turn around and see what it was that could provoke the beast. But it was there, patient, with dangerous intent. The path she took came to a crossing. 3 different ways to walk, one decision. All of them were covered in thorns made from ice, and all of them led uphill. All of them hit the destination. She felt the breath of her pursuer on her neck. How could it be even colder, pricking her skin like needles? With shaking fingers, she drew the second to last match from its box. Like a beacon, it flared up and pushed back the dream landscape. For this short moment, she was back in her home city. There were multiple streets to choose from. One was inhabited by a pack of stray dogs. One led past a strange man's home. Before she disappeared, he followed her and other people up and down the street. The last one was the one she feared the most. It led towards a destination. Small houses, tiny gardens, leery neighbors, and them. Christabel knew she wasn't looking well. She knew she wasn't well. She felt her throat cramping, her heart racing. Panic was making her shiver far more badly than the cold. But with the flickering of the flame, she noticed them lurking in the shadows. Her pursuers. Staggering, she made the first step towards the 3rd street, and then another, and another. Faster and faster, the match burned down. The snow had become a slippery coat of ice on the ground. Darkness surrounded her, and the only light came from the glowing embers of the match. Time was up. The predator behind her started to walk faster. She was already moving at high speed, and it gave chase. The ground was slippery, and she fell. Sharp pain hit her, but she scrambled back up. With giant leaps, the hunter drew closer, its paws and claws splintering the sheet of ice beneath them like brittle bones. The breath was burning in her lungs. Every muscle ached, and blood ran from a dozen tiny cuts from the icy thorns growing everywhere. Suddenly, there was a snarl directly next to her ear. Saliva splashed onto her cheek. Filled with panic, she rammed her elbow into the jaws next to her. The surprise in her own movement threw her off balance, and as her elbow connected, she fell to the ground, and her hurting hand couldn't hold onto the matchbox anymore. It fell too. Just like her, and slid away out of her reach. The predator shook its head, surprised by the sudden pain and the counterattack. It took a short moment to process the development. Then its glaring eyes settled on the girl once again. She was crawling over the ice, thorns ripping at her. Growling, the beast came closer to her. They were separated by only some inches as her questing fingers touched the familiar surface of the matchbox, and she grabbed it. It lay directly in front of a wooden door. Feverishly, she struggled to open the box. Another growl came from the beast, stepping over its prey. The dark shadow of the hunter fell across her face. Then she drew out the last remaining match, and whilst she was hammering with one fist against the door, she lit the tiny piece of wood. There it was, the house door. Every tiny piece of doubt and panic told her to run, to go. There was only pain waiting for her in this place. She leaned onto the door frame and pushed the button for the doorbell. A flood of memories returned with this very simple sound. They weren't making this easy for her. Tears were welling up in her eyes. She tried to fight them. Then the door was opened. Within the frame they stood, one single person, the most terrifying thing on earth, was looking at Christabel. They looked her up and down, full of surprise and astonishment. The girl's lungs denied the service. All muscles were tensed to the limits. All she was able to do was trying to smile. They didn't know. How could they? All the things she had survived, all the pain she had gone through. But there was only acceptance in their eyes. There was some kindling of understanding in their eyes. And without any words, they stepped forwards and hugged the girl. Unfathomable relief overtook Christabel, and she pressed them to her chest with all her might. After a very long moment, they took a step back, and the person Christabel's heart desired took up the girl's hand with the paper box. And through the veil of her own tears, she could see. It was filled with matches once again. Changeling the Lost, 2nd edition, is owned by White Wolf and published by Onyx Path Publishing. This piece of fan material was written, recorded and edited by Tom Moore. Co-editing by Tracy Norman. All the art on the channel is designed by Looney Dragon. You can find her at Twitter with her label @LooneyDragon. Thank you for listening.